When I recently posted my guitar builds to places like Reddit and Facebook, I surprisingly got a ton of questions about the stand I used to pose them on. Luckily, I filmed the build process, so now I'm going to show you exactly how to make your own. I decided to build one myself after finding out how much wooden guitar stands are online. I started by drawing a rough shape on this piece of walnut to make sure I was avoiding this hideous knot, which was also a weak point in the board. I wanted this stand to match one of my guitars, so I pulled together some scraps from the guitar build and some similar colored woods. After some daunting research and math, I determined these stands are really just two pieces, a base and a stand. The stand is essentially one board that allows a slight angle, but instead of cutting an angle on the bottom, I cut it square and allowed the bandsaw to cut around the design I sketched to create a relief. The relief allows some room for some larger guitars to wiggle around without bumping into the stand. The same thing could be done with a straight board and a slight angle. I wanted the base to have some color, so I cut down each piece to make what was essentially an edge-grained cutting board. I had some bacote, curly birch, walnut, and padauk to make this all possible. If you're going to make this, you can design it however you'd like. Maybe you'd prefer solid chunk for the base, or even a book match of some sort. That's the great thing about something this easy. It allows for creativity to play a larger role in the design. My design just happened to mimic a cutting board. I left some of the pieces a bit long to account for snipe at the planer. I don't make cutting boards often, but this is the second most satisfying part. Planing it down to reveal that perfect lamination of different wood species. This next part isn't absolutely necessary, but I wanted the vertical portion of the stand to have some meat to it and some color. We'll just call it the headstock. I took the leftover scraps and glued them to the sides of the top where the hanger would be installed. The idea was to mimic the cutting board style of the base and contrast the centered walnut. If you can't tell by now, this project was just kind of a make it up as you go sort of thing. No plans or measurements, just an idea. And just like I said, when I posted the original guitar build to a few different social sites, I had quite a few inquiries about this stand. If you want to make it yourself with a more detailed guide, I'll leave a link to the download for the plans below. They include pictures with measurements, overall dimensions, and detailed information on how to make this for yourself. I've never used plans for any build before. They kind of remind me of homework, and I was never a focused student. This is also the first time I've ever made plans, so I'd be curious on some feedback from anyone who downloads them. But if you think my videos are good, I'm sure you'll think they're fine. While the headstock was drying, I took the time to cut out the base from the panel. My goal was to not have many straight lines in this and to have it sort of mimic the organic shapes and curves of a guitar. To add a bit of an elegant touch, I went with a chamfer on the edges to balance out the curvature of the base. I don't know about you, but I get impatient waiting on glue to dry. As you can see, it's still a bit wet, but the Titebond bottle says 30 minutes to dry is fine. So that's what I went with. And it's what allowed me to get this whole project done in just a couple of hours. I've actually never tilted my bandsaw table before, so this was a bit intimidating. I knew I could have cut these back angles by hand, but again, I'm impatient and this looks way cooler on camera. There was not a set angle here, it was more or less just a way to tie the back to the front and flush up the glue lines. And I'm not gonna lie, it was trickier than it looks, but overall it turned out decent enough to mold into something nice. Similar to how I make guitars, I used rasp to blend all the contours together and give this thing a more natural look. There were a lot of bandsaw marks and uneven cuts that this rasp just made quick work of. It's really satisfying to see these things go from rough cut to smoothly blended. It's like mixing woodworking with sculpting. Straight lines and right angles become a bit boring after a while, and I think that's why I've been gravitating towards guitars and carving recently. To keep this thing easy, I went with screws to attach the two portions of the stand. I pre-drilled holes through the base along a center line first, then I sanded away any blowout I was too lazy to prevent. A cool trick I learned a while ago to accurately locate placement for dowels and screws was to place the screws in the mating workpiece and expose them just a smidge through the other side. This allows them to act as pinpoint locators for pre-drilling the second workpiece. With the screws in place, I align the second workpiece over them and put a bit of downward pressure to mark my points to pre-drill. Marking the center lines beforehand helps a lot in this process as well. This made it super easy for these longer screws to drill in effortlessly and to keep everything centered. And again, just like cutting boards, I added some rubber feet across the bottom to allow some breathing room and stability on slicker surfaces. Instead of making a hanger, I purchased a super cheap wall hanger online and cut the mounting portion down to fit the headstock better. Last thing to do was pre-drill its mounting points and move on to finish. In the spirit of impatience and laziness, I used a hard wax oil for finish. Just a quick buff on and wipe off. The colors came out awesome after seeing what the finish revealed in the wood grain. Doing this myself was much better than blowing the $300 on a less cool version online, and I even made it faster than it would have taken to ship to my house. Again, if you're wanting to make this for yourself, I put the download link to the build plans in the description. I'll also tag some of my guitar builds if you're interested. Thanks for watching, and happy building.